And with your estate, there are three things to think about. Firstly, upstream. What happens if it all goes wrong and your parents die and their wealth passes through to you? Okay? How should you amend your estate and their estate such that their estate's dealt with properly? Secondly, if you die, what happens to your estate, or where should it go? And thirdly, how do your children, the downstream estate, work in relation to this? So let's start with your estate, the midstream estate, the bit in the middle. Joe Smith, director, is deceased, and he's got a term life policy in his name, and he leaves that to his spouse, Mrs. Smith. What's wrong with that? It's not protected. It's not gifted over. You're creating a gifting problem. So it's dead simple. Instead of having the will going to Mrs. Smith and the life insurance policy in Joe Smith's name, transfer it all by will into the family trust and put the life policy there. That way the life policy is not caught up with probate, which requires a 6-month stand-down period. Okay, so Mrs. Smith's not waiting for it. It goes straight to the trustees. And secondly, his entire estate or her estate after death drops in tax exempt. Okay, and there's no estate duty in New Zealand. It was repealed in 1998. And there's no gift duty on the transfer of property through an estate. So these $500,000 loan balances drop straight into the trust. No gifting implications, and the life policy gets paid out straight away. Make sense? So that's the midstream estate. The upstream estate. Here we've got Joe's parents. They're leaving Joe $1 million. And there's nothing wrong with receiving $1 million in an inheritance. But if you receive it like this, there are problems. What are the issues? Same issue, isn't it? Gift duty. So what we should be doing with Joe's parents is encouraging them to direct their inheritance straight into Joe's trust. So if you set up trusts, you should be thinking about going to your parents and saying, look, if you send that wealth directly to your individual hands, then your spouse can potentially take that as matrimonial property. And additionally, it creates a big gifting problem for you. And if you were a bankrupt at the time they died or became a bankrupt just after, that asset would be taken for creditors. So in every way, it's superior to have their estate flowing through to the trust. One of the things you might do is set up a separate trust for your parents to protect the assets from rest home fees. And you might even consider flowing it through to a separate trust for you, so that when the asset comes through, it's not joint matrimonial property in your joint trust. It's separated out to a separate trust for you if you wish to protect your inheritance as separate relationship property. And I'll show you that in a second. And then, of course, your children. And here we have Joe's children. They, of course, grow up and they become subject to matrimonial risk as well. And they become subject to trading risk. And what you've got to think about is, do you want your hard-earned life earnings, plus your life insurance policies? If you don't have a lot now, think about the life insurance policies. That will create additional wealth. Do you want that going to your kids, whose spouses can take half, and if they become bankrupts, where they lose the money? And I think for most people, they'd want to do the best they can for their kids. And one of the things you can do is consider setting up separate inheritance trusts for the children, such that all of the estates flow into the family trust and then down to these separate inheritance trusts for each child. Okay, so rather than going to the kids where they have to gift it back to a trust, pass it to separate trusts for each child, and there's no gift duty, no transfer taxes whatsoever, just drops into their separate trusts, and they take their share of your inheritance via a separate trust that gets created for them after your death. All right, this is not a feeding frenzy for lawyers. You leave instructions to the trustees to create these trusts after death. Okay, you need to set your family trusts up now, but after death, you spawn these separate children's trusts. Make sense?